It is August 7th, 2025, and it looks like we could see an in person meeting between President Trump and Russian President Putin as early as next week. This is the Kremlin says that whatever U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff had to say on Wednesday, that was enough to get them to agree to this meeting. What did he say? Well, we may just find out, but I am not exactly holding my breath hoping for some kind of deal to end this war altogether. Why? Well, because the Kremlin has been saying for years now that there are a number of different things that need to be addressed in order for this war to come to a close, a number of things that need to be agreed upon. And no, we're not just talking about a Minsk 3.0 type deal. We're also in a position where Russia is rightfully so incredibly wary about what the West is going to do if there is some kind of ceasefire, about the quote unquote peacekeeping troops that Europe is going to try to pour into Ukraine. They're concerned about the fact that for a number of months now, the Trump administration has been telling Europe that they need to take on the responsibility for the brunt of the proxy war against Russia so that the US can focus on other conflicts. So, what does all of this mean for Trump and Putin getting together, shaking hands, doing some kind of a photo op, and making it look as though things are, let's just say, a little bit better than they are? Why would Russia agree to this? Well, we got into all of the latest with a special guest earlier, so let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is international relations and security analyst Mark Sleboda. Mark, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Rachel, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show.
Always good to have you. Now, I want to get your take on the latest here as things seem to be coming together a bit too fast. You've got Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff, who visited Moscow for talks on Wednesday. And now we have confirmation from President Putin himself that there are plans for direct talks with Trump, possibly in the UAE and possibly as early as next week. You also have reports saying that the White House is trying to kind of throw Zelensky into those talks. So, how do you view all of this? Is everything coming together? Could we see a deal, or is that a bit too fast? And instead, we're just seeing the possibility of direct talks, even if we don't have some kind of an agreement that is going to quote unquote end this war?
Yeah, I think we have an increased chance of a diplomatic settlement that might end the war. We've increased in chance from 0.0% to 0.000000001%, right? So which is to say, no, I don't see anything. I don't read that is what happened at all. I see this as political theater. I see this almost as a nod, personal concession from Putin to Trump to save him from a bad political position that he worked himself into by making threats that he couldn't back up. He has there is pressure on him from within his own party, especially from Congress, from not only from the neocons but from both sides of the political aisle who back Ukraine, from people within his own administration, from the media, from the Europeans. I'm absolutely sure very significant pressure from the blob, from the U.S. deep state, the security services, and he made threats about 100% tariffs. So tariffs here, tariffs there, and all kinds of bluster. And he started talking tough about Putin, and Putin didn't blink. And Putin's allies in the BRICS, right? China, India, Brazil, they didn't blink under the threat of secondary tariffs either. And I think Trump didn't know what to do, because to actually impose those tariffs would cause global economic chaos that would threaten global instability, higher inflation and energy prices in the United States, which would threaten Trump's midterm election possibilities. But also, it would, I think, galvanize. I think right now it is galvanizing the BRICS to resist U.S. economic threats and pressure even more. The Brazilian president Lula da Silva, besides a couple weeks of statements like we don't need an emperor and no gringo is going to come and tell us who we can and can't trade with and other things, he has now been calling for the BRICS to come together and present a unified front against the threats of U.S. economic warfare of these tariffs. So that is already Trump at one point tried to say that with absolutely zero reason whatsoever, tried to say that he destroyed BRICS and BRICS was done and no one was ever going to meet again, and now they're somehow for him U.S. enemy number one, it seems, because they're threatening to. Well, they're not threatening the dollar; they're just threatening to not use it. I mean, that to use their own currencies instead. They're not even talking about creating an alternative global reserve currency to challenge the dollar. There are all kinds of costs involved with being the holder of a global reserve currency, as the U.S. is finding out. There are benefits to it, right? You can print money printer go blur, quantitative easing, all of that. But there are also lots of problems, mainly that you have to run an import economy. And that has led to very significant economic problems now in the United States, and China is not willing to take those on, and no one else is really in a position. So, but he's going after BRICS, and BRICS is presenting a united front. So I think Trump found himself, without leverage, without weapons in his quiver, right, without to use against Putin. And rather than risk the political damage that would result from economic stability by going through with 100% tariffs on anyone who continued to trade with Russia, there's this political spectacle that has been created instead. And this is, in a way, a concession on Putin's part, because Putin said, no, we're not meeting until we've got something to sign, right? That is, Trump has been begging for a face-to-face meeting because he seems to think that with his great mafia art of the deal style, that all he has to do is talk to Putin and Putin will agree to whatever he says on his terms. Like that's going to work or something like that. I don't know what goes through Trump's head, but he's been really hot on a face-to-face meeting. Well, the Kremlin has been really cool because they don't want a face-to-face meeting where Putin says "niet" to completely tank any chance of primarily Trump walking away from this whole thing, which is what they really want. So they're granted this concession. Fine, we'll meet with you if that will pull your bacon out of the domestic political fire that you've created for yourself with threats that you can't follow through on because of the consequences if you do. And I see that. At the same time as Trump is the White House is talking up, a trilateral meeting, Russia's saying something completely different. Like we're once again, they're saying we're not in principle against the trilateral meeting, but there are all kinds of concessions about an actual. There are all kinds of concerns there conditions that a diplomatic settlement has to be within sight before we can meet, and we're not even close on that matter. So we're hearing completely different story from the White House and from the Kremlin on this. And if they think somehow they're going to sneak Zelensky into a meeting for a photo op, I don't think Putin's gonna react well to that. I mean, he's been remarkably playing, shall we say, the good cop for Trump. If maybe Medvedev is playing the bad cop and mixing it up, Putin has been always kind and diplomatic. And that's what Trump says. We have a really nice phone call and he's always really polite. And then he doesn't stop bombing my proxy regime in Kiev each
Right.
evening, and I don't understand why, right? And there's talk that that he's leading me on, and like Putin's position hasn't changed at all. If anyone is leading anyone on, it's you leading yourself on, right? And Putin actually addressed that, I think, very specifically, not directly to Trump, but in a conversation that he had with the Belarusian president Alexander Lukashenko in the last week, that was taped, and he said that disappointment, and it was clear he was talking about Trump's disappointment, is the result of excessive expectations, saying that you
Mhm.
wanted more and you expected more, even though I gave you no signals that I was actually going to give you that, and you just thought that you could bluster and demand and charm your way. That Trump does this again and again and again. He'll say something that hasn't been agreed on with the idea that the fact that he said it will pressure the other side into accepting it. But that hasn't worked at all in their negotiations with Russia in the past half a year, and I see no chance of it working, even if Trump and Putin meet face to face, which God help us all.
I know. Well, and I know that's something we've been talking about for months. The fact that, as you were noting there, Russia's been pretty clear about look, if there's going to be a face to face meeting, the thought is that there's going to be some sort of a deal that Trump and Putin shake hands. I don't know that necessarily the war is over, but there's some
Yeah.
sort of a deal in place. Whereas Trump has wanted this like meet and greet where, yeah, he wants to throw Zelensky in there. And we're all watching it going, okay, so the fact that they're agreeing to a meeting, what does this actually mean? I guess we'll find out as early as next week. But with what Trump has been doing from these ultimatums, these deadlines that he's throwing out to Russia to, trying to hit other countries with tariffs, India specifically, which I'm watching this and going, why are you trying to pick a fight with India? I mean, he's throwing another 25% tariff on India, accusing the country of purchasing Russian oil. God forbid. He's only mad because they're selling it and making a bit of a profit. But in doing so, Trump is also directly pushing India right to China, right? You've got, according to reports, Modi preparing to visit China for the first time in over 7 years. So when it comes to how close this is making BRICS and how much Trump is actually realizing and possibly backing away, how do you view that? Because obviously Russia and China are closer than ever. Now they're kind of getting India in the mix, and this is all Trump's doing here.
Are you familiar with Ian Bremmer and the Eurasia Group?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of a big, or at least he presents himself as a big wig head of his own think tank, and they do have a often drolly amusing geopolitical puppet show they do called Puppet Regime, and usually it's just ridiculous, typical Western moralizing against Putin, against China, against Iran, the standard sort of things. But they also don't like Trump because they're establishment, blob rather than the Trump administration. And they did a clip in the last week that has a kind of informal get together between Trump and Putin and Modi and Xi Jinping, and Trump is raging at Putin. Why don't you do what I say? I'm so angry at you. I'm so angry at you. And he reaches out and he punches Modi in the face.
Yeah.
and and
That about sums it
Putin's like,
up.
what? And Modi's like, what did you hit me for? Because I'm so angry at him, right? And yeah, that pretty much sums it up. So it was drolly amusing. Um, and it's also interesting that India is by far the two biggest purchasers of Russian oil specifically, not oil products or gas or other things, but oil is China number one and India number two, and together they're purchasing close to 80% of Russia's oil right now. It's a big amount. Then you've got the EU and Turkey and a few others, and he's certainly not talking about tariffing them for that on top of it. But notice that he's not talking about China, which is an even bigger, because he just lost a trade war with China. In particular, at least to a significant extent, was due to China's leverage over the U.S. by withholding rare earths and crucial minerals that China has a kind of veritable monopoly on, certainly in the quantity and the quality needed by the Pentagon in a U.S. high tech for industry for high tech purposes. And he can't reopen that trade war with China. He can't afford to do it. So China gets a pass in all of this. And the reason why he is tariffing India is because he can. Because India's economy doesn't have that kind of leverage over the United States. And because it sends a message, right? People that are in our camp, and whatever the Indians may say, the West definitely views India as in their camp, that don't obey orders, right? They suffer consequences. That is, I think, the message that is being sent. But even if we look at the details of the tariffs that have been announced punitively on India, we find that there's a lot more show and political theater, as always with Trump, than there is reality. So India has already been leveled with 25% tariffs because of Trump's renegotiating of the global trade terms with tariffs on everybody. But then he put an additional 25%, bringing the total to 50% on India for punishment for buying energy from Russia. Now, that's not actually due to come into effect until August 21st. So there's a lot of wiggle room time there. But even further, if you look at the details, India does some $120 billion worth of exports to the U.S. a year, right? And the big industries are diamond and gems, pharmaceuticals, electronics, like smartphones and stuff, and services, particularly IT services. Those annoying Indian call guys and on the phone and everything. No offense to India, but I don't like any call guys. So now, the reality of those tariffs, though, if you read into the fine print that is not being talked about in the media, is out of that $120 billion of Indian exports to the US, only 20 billion of it is actually subject to those tariffs. The vast majority of it, right? The 100 of that 120 billion, particularly in the services, the pharmaceuticals, and in the electronics. That's not tariff. That doesn't fall under the tariffs. Those are exemptions. So it's only the diamond and gem industry, right, that is significantly being affected by these tariffs, which is definitely, Trump pulling punches so as not to disrupt things too much. First, it was supposed to be 100%, right? Lindsey Graham wanted 500%, right? Trump said 100%. Now he's actually delivering 25%, and it's not going to be until August 21st. And it actually doesn't affect the vast majority of what India actually exports to the United States. This is all Trump the showman. Trump, everything is about performance and narrative, and him claiming a victory, and very little about substance. And he presents himself as all powerful, but that's not really the case. And I think this is when you look into the details of this. So I think Putin is pulling Trump's out of the fire by agreeing to this meeting and pretending that there's some actual progress made towards ending this conflict, which I don't actually think there is. First of all, the Kiev regime and the Europeans would never agree to anything and Russia is still not going to make any substantive concessions, right, to save Trump. This is a face-saving gesture. It doesn't cost Putin that much, and that's why it was agreed to. But him attempting to pressure Putin further into meeting with Zelensky, I'm pretty sure the Kremlin's probably going to draw a red line on that and say, yeah, we're already doing a handshake and a photo op with you. We're not doing it with Zelensky too, because that would be granting Zelensky a legitimacy that the Kremlin frankly doesn't believe, and neither do I believe, that he deserves. He's not a president. He's a U.S. proxy puppet who's even past his constitutional terms.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you bring that up because I think that, in the West, the idea from some of what people are in the media are saying is basically making it sound like Trump and Putin are going to shake hands, agree that the war is over, and then we're all fine and good. But what we've seen from Putin has been him repeatedly bringing up all of the things that need to be discussed before there can be a full ceasefire, before there can be any kind of a deal. And so that kind of brings us back to what's happening on the battlefield, because obviously, if there is any kind of agreement, it's going to have to take into account the state of things on the battlefield. What do we recognize as part of Russia versus part of Ukraine? Oh, and who is going to enforce all of this? Because as you were pointing out, Zelensky's not going to enforce it. Europe's not going to enforce it. And Russia knows that. So when it comes to the situation on the battlefield, I know that the West is trying to present this as just some Russian summer offensive where they're just taking a little bit more territory. Don't be too concerned about it. But as you've been covering for years now, this is a war of attrition. This is aimed at wearing down Kiev's forces. So how do you view the situation on the battlefield? Do you think that the US is starting to get a little bit concerned about their proxy state and the position it's currently in?
Yeah, I don't think they're concerned. I think they're panicking. I think this is a result of. I'm not so sure how much Donald Trump knows. Donald Trump continually talks about casualty numbers that he obviously doesn't have a clue on. He has no idea that forced conscription is going on in Ukraine, according to some of his recent statements in the press. So I don't know how much Donald Trump knows or doesn't know, or what his handlers tell him. I don't know what Tulsi Gabbard is doing. I guess she's spending all her time on Russiagate rather than informing him about the conflict in Ukraine. I don't know. But obviously, some people in the U.S. understand how bad the situation is, and all of this slow war of attrition is really starting to see its pay come due. The Kiev regime simply is just so critically short of manpower, and even more critically short of manpower that is one that isn't a forced conscript and that wants to fight and die for this regime and has any combat experience left whatsoever, because most of those are gone. They're past or crippled and missing multiple limbs. So it's a very bad situation for them at the front. I mean, in multiple areas, not only in Pokrovsk, but also in Konstantinovka, in Seversk, in Kupansk, in Liman, Chasiv Yar. Russia just finally finished up in the last week, but pretty much everywhere along the contact line. And the Kiev regime forces, I don't see them collapsing, right? A lot of people have this I think unrealistic notion that someday they're just going to stop fighting and put up their hands and say, "Oh, we can't do this anymore. Give us papers to sign." I don't think anything is going to happen that way. But they are increasingly crumbling in multiple places. Russia is able to penetrate their lines all over the place because they don't have enough people to man the defensive lines everywhere. So Russia's infiltration with their DRG groups is able to collect behind the lines and form critical masses already behind the Kiev regime's lines. And that's what they constantly complain that's going on in areas like, the Pokrovsk and the southern, the south central Donbass area. So, and they're short of everything, right? They're short of artillery, they're short of munitions, they're short of even drones at this point. They're becoming short of, and this is not my take. This is what Ukrainian commanders are desperately crying and complaining about all the time, and it's getting harder and harder for the Western media to ignore, right? And the only way they try to wash over all of it is yes, Russia's doing this, but they're suffering massive casualties, right? While doing so, and that's the last Ukraine is winning, right? Is Russia is taking lots of casualties, which they're taking casualties, but it's nothing like what Trump or what the Kiev regime presents that they're taking. And where the Kiev regime keeps getting weaker and weaker by the day, the Russian military keeps getting stronger and stronger by the day. And if you really look in, you'll find that even the Kiev regime has admitting that by talking about the numbers that the Russian military is getting bigger month by month, year by year, because they're adding far more people all the time and volunteer contract soldiers who want to be there to a rather than losing people, right? You know, the losses versus minuses is heavily in the Russian favor there. So they're just going from strength to much stronger. And like I said, we're starting to see a crumbling effect all along the front lines. And the manpower woes are so bad that the Kiev regime is resorting to desperate measures. One, they allowed the quote unquote recruitment of people over the age of 60 last week. And now, as you highlighted to me in one of the things that you sent me that you wanted to discuss, they've been doing this all along, but they're shall we say to a greater extent they are providing military training for children as young as 14 because they'll be in the meat grinder soon enough. I guess there's a little bit of optimism there that the war will last that long, that a 14-year-old will reach the age of 18, which presumably will already be conscription age by that time. That's a 4-year time frame. Zelensky has talked that he expects the war to last till 2029. Zaluzhny has spoken about 2034, I think. Europeans have also tossed out numbers like 2030 that they expect to be at war with Russia, and they just want the Kiev regime to hold on that long, I guess. I think the war will go on. It's not going to end this year, and I don't think it's going to end next year. But I don't think it's going to last till 2034 either. I'm not that black pilled.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. And as we're watching this kind of come together, I know Zelensky was saying earlier, oh, yeah, we're ready for the war to end. But it's like, doesn't seem like it, right? From everything that they're doing, from everything that Europe is preparing. And even with Trump going back and forth, exactly as you're pointing out there, Trump is trying to make it seem like, oh, this is bad for both sides, right? All these people are dying on both sides, as if it's both sides are kind of level with each other, right? Not as if the manpower shortages are being felt heavily on Kiev's side and not at all on Russia's side. So the last thing I want to ask you is we kind of go into next week watching all of these headlines. If you were advising Russia how to go into these talks and what to watch out for, what would you be saying to them right now when it comes to dealing with the US and also keeping in mind, which I'm sure they're keeping it in mind, but the fact that they cannot trust NATO and NATO is going to use every inch that they can possibly get to try to harm Russia. That's what they've been doing this entire time now.
Well, I think one of the most important things they have to worry about is eye safety. They have to worry that they don't roll their eyes so hard that it risks permanent ocular damage, right? When they're in these talks, right? So I don't. First of all, I don't think they should agree to anything. They've agreed to a photo op and a meet and greet and a handshake, and this will somehow, I don't know if it's actually politically going to help Trump. I think it may. I mean, he'll get eaten alive just for shaking hands with Putin. So I'm not in the Western press and so forth. So he seems to think that he's going to be able to get Putin to make concessions to end this conflict on American terms, right? This U.S. proxy war on Russia, if he can just meet with Putin. I'm pretty sure that Putin has no intents of giving him an inch, that he will smile and meet with him, but that Russia's long held demands, their terms, if you will, for ending this diplomatically or militarily, whatever the case may be, that they are met one way or another. If they're not agreed to them diplomatically, then we'll continue on the battlefield. And at the end of the day, I think they're considering that this is a pacifier, right? This is meant to calm Trump down while they continue on the battlefield, because they don't actually believe that any diplomatic settlement is possible, because whatever Trump may want, the rest of the US, the actual power behind the throne, the deep state, the blob, Congress, all of these things, they would never agree to any of this. And they know that the Kiev regime will never agree to this. And they know the Europeans won't agree to anything to agree to Russia's terms. And Russia's not about to settle for anything less than their terms at this point, particularly when victory is within sight. So I think they'll toss Trump a political life preserver, that is this photo op, but I think that's probably the extent of it. And as long as they don't agree to anything, and it's quite obvious they can't trust Trump, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we've already seen Iran be bombed in the middle of negotiations with the US, where it was made clear in the US and the Israeli media that Trump was deliberately stringing the Iranian government along in order to help Israel launch a surprise decapitation strike on the Iranian government. Quite obviously, nothing can be taken for granted with these people. Nothing can be accepted on word or anything like that. But quite honestly, I don't fear that with Putin at this point. They're obviously going to attempt to pressure him into things with the amazing power of the narcissist in chief's charisma, quote unquote. I don't think that charisma is going to have the overbearing effect on Vladimir Putin that it may have on, I don't know, Mark Rutte.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting
Daddy.
to see how this kind of comes together. But I'm with you. It's funny that Trump is not smart enough to see what Russia's doing. Then like, here, come shake our hands over here. Here, we'll have this phone call. And then at the same time, Russia's still pursuing their goals in Ukraine and continuing on in the same way. And yet the US hasn't seemed to be able to figure it out yet. I know that there is certainly a lot at stake here all around. And I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to break down all of the latest here. International relations and security analyst Mark Sleboda, thanks so much for your time and insight.
Thanks for having me.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanction. You can also check out Sanction over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/rachelblevins. As always, thank y'all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.